Welcome back to Nightmare Theatre. Tonight I will be reading 10 of my favourite short creepypasta stories for you to enjoy. I can hear the rain and thunder outside as we speak, so I know it's a great time for a spooky story. Grab something to drink and perhaps a snack. Make sure your loved ones are tucked into bed and let's ready some scary tales. Our first creepypasta is called Mother. A young girl is playing in her bedroom when she hears her mother call to her from the kitchen, so she runs downstairs to meet her mother. As she's running through the hallway, the door to the cupboard under the stairs opens and a hand reaches out and pulls her in. It's her mother. She whispers to the child, "Don't go into the kitchen, I heard it too." Our next creepypasta is called Daddy. Daddy, I had a bad dream. You blink your eyes and pull up on your elbows. Your clock glows red in the darkness. It's 3:23. Do you want to climb into bed and tell me about it? No, Daddy. The oddness of the situation wakes you up more fully. You can barely make out your daughter's pale form in the darkness of your room. Why not, sweetie? Because in my dream, when I told you about the dream, the thing wearing Mummy's skin sat up. For a moment you feel paralyzed. You can't take your eyes off of your daughter. Then the covers behind you begin to shift. Creepypasta Story 3. Masterpiece. I've been lying down for hours now. It's 5:35 a.m. and there's not much I can do. You know what the worst part about my situation is? I'm in the same room with my parents. They keep looking at me, and I can't help but look back and try not to cry or scream. Their eyes are focused on me, and their mouths are wide open. There's the strong scent of blood, and I'm paralyzed with fear. Here's the thing. The second that I make any hint that I'm not asleep anymore, I'm completely screwed. I will die, and there's nobody around to save me. I've been trying to think of a way out, but the only idea I have is to rush for my bedroom door, run outside the front door, and scream for help, hoping any neighbours hear me. It's risky, but if I stay here, I'll surely die. He's waiting for me to wake up and see his masterpiece. You're probably wondering what's going on. I do get ahead of myself sometimes. About 3 hours ago, I heard screaming from the other side of the house. I got up and went to check on the noise, and I realized that I had to use the restroom. Instead of doing the smart thing and investigating, I used the bathroom first. I could have gotten myself killed right then for my stupid actions, but I actually did my business and took a peek outside the bathroom. There was blood on the carpet. I got very worried and ran back to my room and hid under my sheets, like the pussy I was. I tried to convince myself to go back to sleep, that it was just some really vivid dream or something. I heard my bedroom door open. Like the terrified child I was, I peeked from under my blankets to see what was going on. I could see something dragging my dead parents into the room. Whatever it wasn't human, I can tell you that. It was hairless, with no eyes and no clothing. It walked like a caveman with its back slouched as it dragged my parents. But this thing was much smarter than any caveman. It was aware of what it was doing. It propped my dad up on the edge of my bed and made him face me. Then it sat my mother down in the chair and positioned her towards me as well. After that, it started rubbing its hands on the walls, staining them with blood, and then drew a circle with a pentagram in it. To finish it off, it scribbled a message on the wall that I couldn't read in the darkness. It then positioned itself under my bed, waiting to strike. The scariest thing is now, my eyes have adjusted to the darkness since then, and I can read the message on the wall. I don't want to look at it, because it's terrifying to think about. But I feel the need to see before I'm killed. I peek at the creature's masterpiece. I know you're awake. Creepypasta Story 4. The Portraits. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around the inside of the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the hunter awoke. He turned, blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows. Creepypasta Story 5. The Tape. During the summer of 1983, in a quiet town near Minneapolis, Minnesota, the charred body of a woman was found inside the kitchen stove of a small farmhouse. A video camera was also found in the kitchen, standing on a tripod and pointing at the oven. No tape was found inside the camera at the time. Although the scene was originally labeled as a homicide by police, an unmarked VHS tape was later discovered at the bottom of the farm's well, which had apparently dried up earlier that year. Despite its worn condition and the fact that it contained no audio, police were still able to view the contents of the tape. It depicted a woman recording herself in front of a video camera, seemingly using the same camera the police found in the kitchen. After positioning the camera to include both her and her kitchen stove in the image, the tape then showed her turning on the oven, opening the door, crawling inside, and then closing the door behind her. 8 minutes into the video, the oven could be seen shaking violently, after which point thick black smoke could be seen emanating from it. For the remaining 45 minutes of video, until the batteries in the camera died, it remained in its stationary position. To avoid disturbing the local community, police never released any information about the tape, or even the fact that it was found. Police were also not able to determine who put the tape in the well, or why the height and stature of the woman in the video didn't come close to matching the body they'd found in the oven. Creepypasta Story 6. The Girl in the Photograph. One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in class and doing math. It was 6 more minutes until after school. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned and looked to the grass outside. It looked like a picture. When school was over, he ran to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so that no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It had a picture of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful he wanted to meet her, so he ran all over the school and asked everyone if they knew her or have ever seen her before, but everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he was home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl, but unfortunately she also said no. It was very late. So Tom walked up the stairs, placed the picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window, so he got out of his bed, walked toward his window, opened it up, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was gone. The next day again, he asked his neighbors if they knew her. Everybody said, "Sorry, no." When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew her. She said no. He went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again he was awakened by a tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly he got hit by a car. He was dead with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers. Creepypasta Story 7. The Clown. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they did not have cable downstairs. The parents didn't want children watching too much garbage. So she called them and asked them if she could watch cable in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the clown statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth. At the very least, close the blinds because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We will call the police. We do not have a clown statue." The police found all three of the house occupants dead within 10 minutes of the call. No statue was found. Creepypasta Story 8. La Nuit. In France, a young ambient musician by the name of Charles undertook an interesting new project. He was going to record the sound of himself sleeping and release it under the name La Nuit, the night. Charles lived alone in a rural area, which would remove things like car alarms, traffic and such from being recorded. He planned his project for many months, acquiring the sensitive equipment to capture all outside noises as well as his own during sleep. Finally, on the 27th of September, he decided to execute his plan. He set up all his equipment and fell asleep at midnight. The next day, Charles reviewed the recording. For the first hour, the recording played his own tossings and turnings, as well as some distant dog barks and a few car alarms. So much for his plan to distance himself from cars. These continued throughout the second hour as well, until Charles heard something that horrified him. For at exactly 3 hours and 24 minutes in, the recording played the sound of his bedroom door opening. Creepypasta Story 9. The Dead. Who discovered the existence of the dead? Everyone knows the name of Antonia Simone, but the exact circumstances of her discovery are wildly varied. In 1992, her younger brother Ricardo was injured in a martial arts accident that left him completely paralyzed. He needed a respirator to live and could only communicate through eye blinks. She was a computer scientist at the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center and decided to create a computer terminal sensitive to the slightest energy source. She was a student of Kirlian photography and strongly believed the body's electromagnetic fields could affect sensitive electronic equipment. She created a terminal that could not be affected by traditional means. No keyboard, mouse or other input devices. A veritable black box. Miss Simone was devoted to her brother and tried for years to make a computer terminal that would allow her brother to communicate naturally. Distraught over the failure of her terminal, which she thought would free thousands of similarly afflicted people, she killed herself by hanging. When paramedics found her body days later, there on a computer screen was the message, "What took you guys so long? I've got the most important news." Creepypasta Story 10. We'll meet again. The entire crew gathered around the window. This time it wasn't to stare into the infinite blackness of space or ponder the nature of their exploration. They weren't looking out, but instead they were looking down at mankind, finally reaping what they had sown. Detonations that were visible from space dotted the earth. The explosions stretched up as if to ensnare heaven itself. The massive mushroom clouds started off in small numbers, but quickly grew as more countries attempted to make their contribution towards their ultimate demise. Soon, the entire world was pockmarked with massive radioactive mushroom clouds. A few hours later, there was nothing and no one left. The astronauts could only watch in a dumbfounded mix of terror and shock as their homes were lost to fallout and scorched earth policies brought into action decades ago. There was no one else, it was only them now. Music sliced through the tension and terror. Vera Lynn crooned, "Keep smiling through just like you always do." All it took was one man to start laughing before the entire crew dissolved. Some laughed until their stomachs wrapped themselves into knots. Some laughed until tears welled up in their eyes. Some laughed even though they found nothing particularly funny. They continued to laugh even though there was no point anymore, and that just made them laugh all the harder. And that is all the creepypastas for tonight. Thank you all for joining me, and be sure to stay tuned for more Nightmare Theatre.